One thing I've learned, if you don't hold their feet to the fire, everybody gets burned.
Hold on. Before you start waving around that freedom of speech thing, when you're in a crowded movie theater and you scream fire, you better be able to smell smoke. You come on this radio.
One thing I've learned, if you don't hold their feet to the fire, everybody gets burned.
Hold on. Before you start waving around that freedom of speech thing, when you're in a crowded movie theater and you scream fire, you better be able to smell smoke. You come on this radio show and you start saying incandescent things like that, you better have more behind you, pal, than just your thumb. I've been listening to talk radio for years, and one thing I just can't stand is when the host has to, push his way onto people, beat the callers into his way of thinking, extending his ego, or when the callers call in and say something so outrageous and the host lets it go unchallenged. The sign you're on the road to truth is the lack of contradiction. You want to find truth, you just don't simply believe somebody because of their authority or their degree, or you listen to what they say, you test it against reality, and you hold their feet to the fire. All right, we're back and we're live. I am trying to, I got messed up here on my, let's see. No, I'm just going to do this. I got messed up on my beginning here, and I'm trying to post this stuff up there, being live and whatever. But, so, give me 1 second here. This whole new Facebook thing and all that is not too good. Trying to post. Come on now, folks. Groups. No, it's pages. That's right. It's pages. Pages. Feet to the fire. What a pain in the neck doing this stuff here. I'm sorry for the delay. Paste. Test. Getting a little ringing here. I figure what that is. All right, that's done. All right, because I got everything stacked up on my window here, my computer window. We're back and we're live. Feet to Fire. I'm your host, James, out the Check the Black Knight of Talk Radio. We're live on Spreaker. This will be uploaded to YouTube, then BitChute, and there's a new one out, a new a place out. What is it called? Brand new tube. So we're trying that one out. I'm gonna check it out and see what happens. But what I want to talk about today, kind of an irreverent beginning here for a very serious point here that I want to do. I talked before about, as I read the Bible a zillion times, a book on tape, ran out, I literally had cassettes, ran them out, CDs. And what's good is when you're listening to it over and over like that, I've been driving 36 years, so when you listen to them over and over again, it becomes like you hear the whole thing. You don't just study different, chop up little pieces here, and this means that, and that means that. You get this kind of a well-rounded, seasoned, big view as well as the small views. And I've always been a fan of prophecy, and I used to follow Dr. Jack Van Impe, who was, I think he started in the 50s, maybe 60s, but in the 70s is when I saw him. He was in his late 80s, passed away this year, which I took almost to be since he was a coma, he was paralyzed, he was unconscious and he all came back and started preaching again. It's kind of like, it's almost like maybe him dying is getting ready for return here of Christ. But anyway, the point being is I went through a lot of the prophecy stuff, and I've heard a lot of prophecy people talk. I'm not happy about it. I don't like it. There's what I consider flaws in it. There's Harold Camping was a good example where he said I think it was 1995, Christ was coming, and then he rephrased it for 2012 and then 2013, and then he had a stroke. Of course, he was pretty old too. So I'm not really thrilled with a lot of people I've talked with about prophecy. Van Impe, I kind of like this stuff. Really made a lot of sense. Of course, he memorized the whole Bible, so it helps when you got that built-in reference material. But anyway, a while back I started looking at Revelations 11:3, and that's what I'm going to talk about here, with the two witnesses. And many already know what that reference is to. And I talked about it in another show. I'll find that show and put it in the links below so that you can listen to it too. But I'm going to probably go over some of the stuff I said because I have a further understanding of it, to me. Now, let me preface this. Let me get a disclaimer out here. I'm not saying that God told me to say this. I'm not in the more charismatic vein of prophecy. For me, prophecy, or the gift thereof, is the ability to discern truth and share truth. That's what it means to me. Now, that truth could be what's to come in the future. Okay, so it doesn't discount foretelling of things, but to me that would be a subset of what the word prophecy, or what prophecy is all about, which is to be able to have a truth meter, some kind of intuition that guides you on track to find truth. Now, I think I have this to my own self. I'm not claiming this in any type of official manner. It's up to you to decide. But my job is to share what I found and then do with it what you will. But I found this to be quite remarkable, given all the years of talking about the prophecies and the witnesses and all that, to actually start to see some things fill in here. Now, another disclaimer, if you will, is my view of the Bible is that it is not necessarily literal. I never rule out literal, but I don't rule out what I would call a formula, a cycle formula. Things happen in repetitions, in cycles. And these things reoccur. Am I doing this right? Okay. All right. Oh. Yeah, I'm all right. I'm getting up. Hold on one second. Let me see if I think I got the subwoofer on. Frankly, I'm getting a ringing that I don't remember hearing before. No, I think it's gone. So I look at, we can learn cycles, patterns, archetypes out of things that happen in the Bible. I mean, we can apply things that happened to David into our lives. It doesn't mean that David's in our lives. So that's kind of how I look at it. And that's why I've talked before about being in end time or latter day cycles. Throughout history, there were cycles of event that mimic, or well, I should say follow along with the teachings, end time teachings of Jesus, in other words. And it actually didn't go into a full-blown end time cycle. Drawing upon the example of I can't think of his name now. God, I'm terrible with this. I never have to worry about being arrogant. I keep saying Job. It's not Job. It's the one who was eaten by the whale, and I can't think of his name. You know, I noticed Inside and Out, and I just blank when it comes to this. Well, guys are listening now, screaming at me. Jonah. There we go. Thank you. So Jonah is the I'm talking about. The idea of Jonah didn't want to go and prophesy to these people for them to turn their ways because he knows that they would turn their ways and it would save him. He's going to have to go across deserts and whatnot to get to them. He's like, God, they're going to change anyway, you know. And he did. He talked and they changed and then they repented. And you do have these cycles where you start to go down that cycle and then there's a revival and it pulls out from the nosedive. And this is the thing I think that's happening now. What makes this time more notable is the world unity in this time of, world power and evil and the blatant across the world of these things. So it's kind of like all the places all over the world are all going into the same kind of a cycle. And so that's why I think it's got a better chance of being a literal end time cycle. But anyway, that's how there's two things there. A prophecy would be, I think, would be trying to find truth. And to quote a book I was reading, he said, I'd rather be mostly right than absolutely wrong. You know, and that's how I kind of look at it. I want to make a wide application because as we get closer in the cycle along the timeline, things become clearer and clearer, and it will make a course adjustment as you're following, the program notes, I guess. If you make some decisions too harshly and on too little information, you could be out in left field and miss the whole turn. So I'm cautious in this area, and you could tell I've wasted 13 minutes in talking about my caution, but it's important because I hear a lot of these braggarts and blowhards coming on here and saying, well, Lord told me it means this and it means that, and I see problems in it, and I'm just me. I'm nobody special. So when I want to go through this, I'm going to explain also that when you're reading your English Bible or whatever language Bible, when you're translating from another language, especially an ancient language, it's hard to be absolutely perfectly exact. Now, I know we're going to get into arguments about the Bible is perfect and where every word is perfect, and the King James is the official Bible and all this. I'm not going to get into that. I'm just going to state these things, and you could turn off or continue listening at your will. But it's best to go back to the original languages to get nuances. Obviously, they're not like wrong. They're not translating it and meaning completely crazy stuff. Of course, there are some decisions made in the more recent translations I think took a little bit more liberty than I would. But it's getting those nuances that I think in the moment when you're studying it really gives it depth. I know that's been the case with me. I'll be reading a English verse and I'll go, wait a minute, what is this word about? There's something going on here. I get that little kind of itch, and I have to go scratch it, and I'll go find the Greek or Hebrew word, and I'll read about it and see the applications, what other times it's being used in the Bible and history, and you can find little nuances that it doesn't change the meaning per se of the verse, it just makes it more clearer. It becomes more colorful, more three-dimensional, more alive. And hopefully you'll see that as I go along here. So the two witnesses, to give an overview, the two witnesses are going to be on earth, and they will prophesy. And remember my thing, they will tell and point out truth for a certain amount of time. Well, actually, let me just read the verse, rather than me. And it's Revelation 11:3, and I will grant great authority unto my two witnesses, and they will prophesy for 1,260 days. Or the way I would put it is 1,260 days, clothed in sackcloth. And I'll explain all of this when we get through here. These are the two olive trees and two lampstands that stand before the Lord of the earth. And if everyone desires to harm them, fire proceeds out of their mouth and devours them, their enemies. And if anybody would desire to harm them, in this manner he must be killed. These have the power to shut up the sky in order that rain may not fall during the days of their prophesying, and they have power over the waters to turn them into blood and smite the earth with every plague. And when they have finished their testimony, the beast that comes up out of the abyss will make war with them and overcome them and kill them. And their dead bodies will lie in the street of the great city, which mystically is called Sodom and Egypt, also where their Lord was crucified. And those from the people and tribes and tongues and nations will look upon their dead bodies for 3.5 days, and will not permit their dead bodies to be laid in a tomb. And those who dwell on the earth will rejoice over them and make merry, and they will send gifts to one another, because these two prophets tormented those who dwelled on the earth. And after the 3.5 days, the breath of life from God came into them, and they stood on their feet, and great fear fell upon those who beheld them. And they heard a loud voice from heaven saying, "Come up here." And they went up into heaven in the cloud, and their enemies beheld them. And in that hour there was a great earthquake, a tenth of the city fell, 7,000 people were killed, etc., etc. I also want to mention, there's a third thing I forgot to bring up in the beginning, is that this is what they call apocalyptic literature. It's a style of literature where it's very, how would I say it? Mystical and graphical. It's got, dragons and beasts and fires, and it's very dramatic. And a lot of times you don't understand them. I mean, the theory, some say that during this time period when this was written, it was kind of a code for the Romans and others who were after them. They could read the stuff and go, "What is this? I don't know what this means." And they would be able to get by, whereas the people who would receive it would be able to so-called decode it and understand it. It's one of the theories. Another is that this is what was literally told them, meaning that they didn't know any kind of code or nothing. It was just that this is what they were told or saw, and they're just faithfully relaying it, which is in a code, so to speak, that to be interpreted at the time. And the interesting thing about these kind of prophecies and these things is that when you try to figure them out, you don't know what it is. You'll make mistakes. You'll be wrong until the time is nigh. And I mentioned this last week about the election coming up with Trump, was that we're heading into this vortex, this event horizon where we can't see beyond it. There's a lot of options, but until the choice was made of what to do by all the players, once that choice is made, you now cannot go back from it, and you move forward. And then, as I put it, vectors of new possibility, the future, do become they come on the screen. It become, okay, now we did this, now these are things that we can do. So that's one of the things about this, is that last week, the election was this vortex, this event horizon that no one could see past. You could guess, you could say things, but once it transpired, now you can see there's a bunch of options that are available. And so that's one of the other things when you're dealing with prophecy that's actually, whether it be the literal point of the prophecy or one of the archetype cycles of that system that you're going through, whether it be the end time or an end time scenario that might end good or might, this is the deal as you go through it. So that's why a lot of times with psychics and all that, they're pretty much worthless, because they're only going to be talking about a particular timeline or vector that they have access to information on, not necessarily that's where prophesying comes in, where truth. Very rare to find someone who's going to be able to have that handle, and it's usually because God has given them, and they have done their homework and their work or whatever, to be able to be in a position to rightly understand, get the messages without corrupting them. And that's what a lot of times people are, get a message from God, insight from the Holy Spirit, the intuitional pipeline, but then your own biases, prejudice, lazy, whatever, all this stuff will then, it'll start contaminating it and become worthless or even harmful. So let me go back and go through this. I hope I could do this quick enough. I laid it all out. I have all the windows open with the verses and various Greek words I want to say. And so hopefully I can go through this without belaboring things. Now let's go back to Revelation 13. I'm using the NASB version. It's because personally I think they did the best job at trying to find, given all the possibilities of little nuances, they put a good job together. But then I'm also going to go back into the Hebrew, Greek behind it anyway. So you can still use any Bible that you want to read along with this, because, the words are going to be just different time period words, but they should line up pretty good. And I will grant, and I'm starting at and because the first part is not important at this point. Let me just go back to it so I'm not... He's talking about measuring the courtyard outside the temple, and and talk about this measure of wheat for the nations and cities, that kind of stuff. And that's not my point on this, so I just skipped the 33. And I will grant the two witnesses of me, and I'm reading this in the more literal way. That's why it may sound funny. The two witnesses of me, and they will prophesy days 1,260 clothed in sackcloth. So let me just start up there. The two witnesses. Let me go to the idea of the witnesses are simple. The witnesses is simply one who is going to. I actually had a show on this earlier too, where I talked about the witnesses. You have the idea of being an observer, being a teacher, being a witness of the truth, being an observer of the truth, and then being a witness in terms of, like in court, I saw it, and you're going to bring out this truth that you saw, whether it be inside or outside. So these two witnesses, and they say two, I think, because of the Old Testament, whenever you have something of consequence, you have to have two or three witnesses testify of it, so you have the two witnesses, and they will, two witnesses of me, that would be the speaker of this, which would be Jesus talking, if I recall. I guess that's kind of important. Jesus or an angel, so it isn't important in the context of what I'm talking about. And they will prophesy, and I went to that word prophesy, and you have the foretelling, prophecy, set forth a matter of divine teaching by special faculty. And when I'm going through all the various aspects of the word here, I'm going to add to this. I know Revelation says you shouldn't add or subtract, but I'm not adding to the Bible. I'm trying to get the word properly, where you're going to have this prophecy where you're going to be able to bring out truth. You're going to be the arbiter, like someone comes to say, hey, you're a mathematics teacher, and you say, how do you do this problem? Did I do it correctly? The professor would then say, yes, you did it correctly, or here's the correct way to do it. So this is the kind of idea that I'm talking about with prophecy. Now, also I want to mention the word, 1,260. That's why I didn't, they say 1,260. But what we also find in biblical scriptures is the numbers themselves have significance. Again, I'm not saying it's not literal, but I look at it more, I pay more attention to the meaning of the numbers rather than the actual time frame. Because if you're looking for 1,260 days and it's longer or shorter, that's not it. So you're going to miss the boat by being that too technical. But when you stick to what it means, you can find more things. When you're talking about 1,000, the property of 1,000, the product of 10 times 10 times 10, is figuratively emphatic, total inclusiveness, showing knowing or nothing is left. So when I go back into the sentence and say, I will grant these two witnesses, and they will reveal truth. They will find truth. They'll reveal lies. They will come out and show lies and show truth. And it's going to be 1,000. They're going to do it in a very decisive, all-showing way. It's going to be done completely. And when you look at the other numbers involved, 200 is also translated oftentimes with the 200. The 2 on top of the 100 is another way of saying something like that. And the 6, it could be used, the word hectaton can be strictly literal in meaning, or it could be in symbolic, referring to, that was the 100. Well, I just said that about the 100. And hex, 60. Same type of aspect. It could be 66, 60. You have this number of man. People have said many times 6 is the number of man, 7 is the number of God. So if you want to look into this word, it's going to be decisively done as much as, in the context of man. So just say they will reveal lies and tell truths decisively, clothed in sackcloth. And that's an old phrase to say that they are humble or humiliated. They're humiliated. And if you, again, I'm driving this to Trump. So, and two witnesses, you got the second one in Pense, I presume, a secondary one, I guess would be like Moses and Aaron, You have two witnesses. They will reveal truth and lies decisively for a time period while being abased. And boy, if you've been watching the mainstream media for the last 3 years, they have been abased. But particularly Trump, they have been abased. They have just been beaten mercilessly about in abasement. So the idea, going back to prophecy, I had the tabs out of order here. To teach, refute, reprove, admonish, comfort others, to doing this duty. I should have put that in order. But so you can see where I'm going in this. And this is coming out of me. I'm not breeding this into it. I'm like this. I got a hunch here. I'm going to look up the words. I will grant these two witnesses of me. They will point out fallacies and truths decisively for a time frame while being abased. All right? Then that fits. That definitely fits. The next, I did it wrong. I got to do them in order. And please don't close the window. All right. The next line, these are the 2 olive trees and the 2 lampstands before the Lord on the earth standing. Okay, so olive trees comes out to me like, okay, what's all that about? These are the 2 olive trees. Olive tree, figurative, is the people of God, indwelt by the Holy Spirit, fulfillment, an archetype, oil in the scripture. That's what it means. You're basically, the 2 lampstands is going to mean that they're Christian. They're going to be filled with the Spirit that's helping to guide them. Now, I'm not taking it like they're, it's not a biblical character here. These are flawed humans doing what they can for doing righteousness, but God likes to use the flawed humans. You can go through Gideon. There's other ones I was going to go into, showing the past about how God wanted to use people who aren't strong so they wouldn't be proud and think that they're doing these miracles and stuff. So these are the 2 who have Christians, or 2 who have God influencing them, and the 2 lampstands. Lampstands is another aspect of candlesticks. Candlesticks in the Old Testament, if you look at the various uses of them, are burned by the altar, so they're going to be a light. They're going to be a light of these teachings. Now, people are going to you're talking about Trump being inspired by God and the land of God, but see, over the years we've been taught about these saints who've been so pristine and all sin and all this stuff. Hey, come on, look at Paul. He was out killing Christians. Then all of a sudden he turned. The idea is that you're in a real world of sin, and these people who stand up and take things upon themselves to do the right thing while doing it in their flawedness, but standing on the principles and not wavering on them for any kind of gratuities, or they're worried about getting in trouble or all that stuff. This is where these words come from. So don't get too grandiose a view of it. The idea of the holy, the olives having to do with the Holy Spirit working within them. They're listening to, the Holy Spirit, if you look at it, is influence. Look at the Holy Spirit's work as influence. When it says spirit, pneumatos, it's talking about like what air fills the tire is a nice way to put it in modern terms. But what fills their tire? And they're getting influence from God. And they are shining out on this aspects. They're warriors. Warriors kill people. They fight, they kill people, and they could make a mistake and kill the wrong person, or they could do a lot of things. But the war is what they're focusing on, right? So you want a warrior who's a good warrior, not who's politically correct, per se, because then you get your butt whipped. So these are the 2 who are influenced by God and are shining out that influence out in their actions. They're actually doing it, standing up for pro-life and all, something like that. Before the Lord is in front, is like, they're not doing it in darkness, but they're on the earth standing. And I like that whole thing, standing. The word got kind of took out. To make a stand, to place, set up, establish, appoint, etc. So when you put this all together and you look at, these are my 2 who are influenced and filled with influence from God, and they are shining that out. They're not hypocrites, and they're before the Lord. They're not hiding away from him or around him, and they're making a stand on earth for God, for these principles. Now, when you put it like that, and you don't want to look for, you're trying to look for the principles and in sinful humans, there you go. Talk about making a stand. After being abased, as we said in the other verse, all this time, making a stand, I can't think of anybody who could have took that abasement and kept on making that stand, not compromising, especially on the abortion and so forth. So I'm going to try and get to the next one here. Some of these go by fast. Revelation 11:5, and if anyone should desire to harm them, fire goes out of the mouth of them, and devours the enemies of them. And if anybody should desire them to harm, thus it is necessary for him to be killed. Now, I'm going to be a little elastic on this. The only parts that stick out to me is the idea of fire goes out of the mouth. And boy, does that sound like Trump. And as anybody who wants to kill him, they're trying to kill him politically by using fire in their mouths. You see what I'm saying? And so it's like anybody desire them harm, he uses his words and, goes out. Let me go over here. I saved a verse on my other computer. It reminds me of this stuff from James. So also the tongue is a small part of the body, yet it boasts of great things. See how great the forest is set aflame by such a small fire, and the tongue is a fire. A very world of unrighteousness, the tongue is set up to among our body parts, which is when it defiles the whole body and so forth. So you got a whole metaphor of the fire coming out of the mouth. And so what this verse comes up with is that if anybody wants to harm the two witnesses, they will give them they will come out with words that are like fire, and also the people who want to harm them come out with the words back at them. And you can see the media and how they've been going back and forth with Trump on this. You could see that they're making a concerted effort using words. They wanted to get him out of office. They wanted to impeach him. They came up. All this stuff was using inflammatory and there's an inflammatory words. There you go. There's an example of that. I'm going to try and keep this up. The next one, 6. These have the power to shut the sky. These meaning the two witnesses, that no rain shall fall in days of prophecy of them, and they have the power so that no rain should fall while they're prophesying, while they have this position. They have power over the waters to turn them into blood, to strike fire and every plague. So if you look at that from the perspective of the people living at that time, somebody who has great power, these are the things that they would say they could do. This would be like, well, he can change the water to blood and all this, going back to the Old Testament, Moses and all that. But if you look at it in our modern context, the President of the United States has great power. He can, through giving a command, send missiles, rain fire from the sky. He could do what I would say the modern version of this to do. So it says that these people are going to be very powerful. These witnesses will be very powerful. They'll have a lot of power in this. Next one, Revelation 7. And when they have completed, and when they have completed the testimony of them, and the beast coming up out of the abyss will make with them war and will overcome them and will kill them. Now, there's a couple things in here. And when they have completed the testimony, all right, so you got these 1,000 years of doing stuff. When they've completed this testimony, the beast, and that's something I looked up, was interested in, coming up out of the abyss. The beast, the word for it simply is like a wild beast. So if you want to look at it in terms of the wild beasts, more like beings who are people who are like feral, like wild human, feral humans, who come up out of the abyss. And the term abyss I looked up, and it has abyss, unfathomable depth, especially Jewish conception, the home of the dead and evil spirits. They're going to come out of these wild beasts. They're going to do things to come out of the depth and of depravity and the depthness. So you have the idea of after they're done with their time frame, doing what they've done, exposing and doing what they say, wild beasts or feral humans will do things that come from the depth of depravity and make war with them, will overcome them, and will kill them. Now, the kill word, does say put to death, but when I look at aspects of it, it could be, they're going to kill them, meaning like knock them out of office. They're going to beat them in the election. They're cheated and lied. They did all these things, said all these things, tried to do all these political tricks, evil, and now they're finding out they had software to change the votes. There's so many extra votes that they put in. They did all this stuff to try and kill them. And right now the world is just saying that they succeeded. They are no longer president. He has been politically killed. And the body of them, this is 8, and the body of them will be upon the street of the city, the great which called figuratively Sodom and Egypt, where the Lord of them were crucified. Now, I'm going to look into this and say, like, well, here we are at this time frame. What I'm looking at is his body, their bodies will be let out. They'll be seen out in these famous powers and famous areas. So I'm going to turn around just for quickness, and now is to talk about it being, it's all over the news. It's all over the world. It's all over the media. Their dead bodies, they're beaten, they're politically killed, beaten people are being displayed out to the whole world. Anderson Cooper talking about how the president is the great, most powerful person in the world, and Trump is like an obese turtle flailing about on his legs, on his back. There's a great example of it in a more modern context. What the principle of it coming out there. So they're going to be out in the media and all the great cities and worlds and powers, and they're going to be laid out from them in that. And they will gaze the gaze of the people and the tribes and the tongues and the nations upon the bodies of them for 3.5 days, and they will not allow them to be put into a tomb. Now, what I got out of this one was 3.5 days. 3 is also symbolically showing the fullness, the triune God, or the threeness, but it's also a half. So there is this aspect of they're trying to completely or officially, authoritatively lay them out, but only halfway. I mean, it sounds like I'm just making stuff, maybe it is, I don't know, maybe to me it's total sense to me, but it may sound like I'm trying to make things fit here. But you have to read into these things being this apocalyptic literature, and it's being coded and can be used for various times throughout history. So these bodies will be laid out for 3.5 days, not the fullness of time. So it's not going to go all the way. So what I'm looking at is, okay, it's going to be laid out for a while, but it's not going to go all the way till the end of the presidency or something like that. If I can kind of fill that in there. And they won't allow them to be put in a tomb. I got some words flagged here before I get too fast. Half, I already did that. Half, not a full way. The dead body. That's another thing. Let me say. The bodies of them. Those words, when you get into it, it talks about a misfortune, a ruin, a fall. So the fall of them, their political fall is going to be laid out, and they want it to be laid out all the way until, presumably, the Electoral College or whatever. They're going to lay it out all the way, but it's going to be cut short, and that's their ruin that they're trying to lay out all the way over there. And they won't allow them to go into the tomb. The tomb is like a memorial, a monument, So what they're trying to do here is to stop them from getting their proper credit or their accolades from the job that was done over the years, which they've done a lot of great stuff. And by doing this, they're trying to stop it from becoming, getting that proper memorial that he would get from it. So not only is it, they beat the election, they're laying him out there and flailing about with him and stopping him from getting any of the credit from the works. I'm actually kind of thinking ahead, too, because there's other stuff. And those dwelling on the earth rejoice among them and make merry, and gifts will send to one another, because these, the two prophets who have tormented them, the people who were on the earth. So now they're all happy. They're giving gifts. I mean, you could see that. They were, they're having a ball. There are people in the streets partying that he lost. They're not partying that Biden won in as much as Trump lost. And they're giving gifts to one another. And they're so happy because these guys have tormented them by giving out truth and finding out the corruption. That's the torment, not because he's a racist and all that crap. That's all just part of this plan. And then after the 3.5 days, the Spirit of life from God enters into them, and they stood upon the feet of them, and fear and great fear fell upon those beholding them. So before this is complete, the life is rejuvenated him. So, I mean, doesn't take a whole lot to figure out. The courts reinstate that he won the election, is how I would say, However that is, I don't know. They find they end up cutting off ballots, and when they recount them, he wins the election. And they stand up, and their great fear came about him. Of course, in the case of Trump, now that he's going to be like more of a bulldog with corruption and all the people who involved in this. So great fear in them. I did flag a word here. What was it? Yeah, the life entered him. Zoe. It's physical and spiritual, and it could be, the aspect that his presidency, being president, is reaffirmed. So his political life is revitalized. He's now going to be winning the presidency. Now this is this part. I want to try and I'm going to say it, but this is a little more. This is more out there in the future. Now I'm kind of looking to this point, right? And so what I've come up with here is talking about he will end up being given the election. Now that part, that's kind of the end of it. There's more to this. Don't know how that's going to manifest. And they heard a great voice out of heaven saying, "Come up to them, come up here." And they went up to heaven and in the clouds and beheld them, and then the enemy saw them. So let me just say that he'll be exalted. The possibly the blindness, the satanic blindness we lifted, and people will see what actually has transpired, and they will be justified in the process. I'll leave it at that because I don't want to get too far, because we got to get closer to this point if this is true to see it. The woe, the second woe has passed. Behold, the third woe is coming. Oh, that's the one. I'm sorry, there's one more. And in that hour there was an earthquake great, and 1/10 of the city fell and were killed in the earthquake. Names of men of 1,000, 1,007. See, there you go with the numbers again. 7, perfection, 1,000, 10 times 10 times 10. So a definitive name of men will die, and the rest became terrified and gave glory to God in heaven. So the earthquake could be the political earthquake of all the corruption and all the stuff coming out. But now I'm starting to write my own novel here because I can't see these people like Byron and all these people coming through at this point, but you don't know. And 1/10 of the city fell. Now I'm thinking the city, and I'm looking at here, is Washington, D.C. This is what I'm thinking of, going back to that mystical city of Sodom, of Egypt. Sodom, obviously, because of the Pizzagate, and Egypt. They got plenty of Egyptian obelisks and whatnot around Washington. So that would be the application of it. And so at that point, there's a great earthquake, perhaps political, perhaps physical, and a tenth of the city fell. And that could be meaning that the government institutions fell and were killed, were ended. And the names of the men involved in this humans were this perfection number, a perfect and complete number of them, and the rest was terrified and gave glory to God. You know, the second woe was past, the third was coming. So let's just leave that one alone. But this is how I would read it if I had to continue on, because right now we're in the point where they're dead. They're politically dead. They're preventing them from any accolades, and they're giving gifts and having fun at this point. That's where we're at. And from that point, if I was to continue along these vortices, lines, trajectories, that's where I would think it would mean where it's going to at that point. Oh, I hit the wrong. Yeah. So hopefully, so let me read it again, and now that I explain it, I just, see, one of the things is I don't like to just say things, because the internet is just full of people just saying things, and it drives me crazy, because they just say things, and it's like, you got to have some meat on the bone, and I hopefully put some meat on this bone. And I will grant authority to my two witnesses, and they will find truth and point out lies for a very effectively complete number of time while being abased. These are the two that have inspiration from God and share this outward. They share they share it outwards, and that stand on earth before the Lord. So they're making a stand on earth for the Lord. And if anyone desires to harm them, fire pursues out of their mouth. Their words, their fire, very harsh, direct words, fake news, and all that stuff devours them. And the people who want to harm them do the same manner. They yell back, in other words. And these are very powerful people, being in commander-in-chief and all that, have new nuclear weapons and who knows what else they got there. They could do all kinds of things. And when they have finished their testimony, the feral humans will come up and do things very, very basely, come out of the deep with base evil to do them and make war with them and overcome them and kill them. And they cheated and did all kinds of things up to and through the election. The media has been berating them constantly, not saying anything they've done right, and they killed them. They're dead bodies. They're politically beaten, apparently, allegedly. They're projecting the beaten bodies will lay in the street for a time. That mystical city, Sodom and Egypt, Washington, D.C., where the Lord was crucified. That's an interesting point on that aspect. I also say that it's televised on the media, so if Jesus was crucified today, it would have been on, it would have been on the TV. And those from the peoples and tribes and tongues and nations will look at their beaten, politically beaten, apparently beaten for 3.5 days, 3 being the total amount of time they want, but it's cut in half, or it's cut short, let's put it that way. It will not permit their presidency, their legacy to be properly enshrined. And those who dwell on the earth will rejoice over them and make merry, and they will send gifts to one another, because those two people who were telling truth and finding corruption tormented them who dwell on the earth. And after 3.5 days, breath of life comes from God into them, and they stood on their feet. So that after this time that's been cut short, probably the courts will find that corruption and will award a presidency to him. They were stood on their feet, and great fear fell upon them who were behold, because now all that corruption has come out. And then we get into this, and a loud voice has come up here, so perhaps the power will be there to, but, this is where, and I'm not saying we're going to go through the whole book of Revelations, the next part, then this happens, because I think, my personal looking at things is that there is kind of like a, what was the word I used? Archetype here. That this has happened many times in smaller, and this is probably the biggest context of it, which makes me wonder if this is not really the latter days because of the size of the context and the consequences. So what is going to happen after this? They'll have great fear, but that doesn't mean they're going to, okay, and everything's going to be wonderful, because you have them talking about the tribulation and whatnot and all this other stuff that's coming. They're not going to stop. They can't stop because their whole, this is the battle for their life and their soul on earth. They're living on earth. So it's probably, if I looking into it, we're looking into, having a lot of riots and explosions and whatnot. So wasn't really smooth when I think about it, but I hope those hanging out in there listening to it got the point of it. There's a lot of things that fit pretty nice, especially when you look into the greater depths of the words in the Greek and the aspects of it, and you start looking at it to more figuratively rather than literally. And again, you don't have to have, it's not either or. This could be literally, this could have, somebody even argued this already happened in Rome. I don't really go in there, but, there's ways to look at this. The best part about it is to not miss the message that applies at the moment while trying to find the absolute aspect of it. So it'd be like trying to listen, if you want to hear a story that has a good moral meaning to it, and you're going, well, did that really happen? Is it fiction? If fiction doesn't matter, no, it's the principle's true. And so that's why I can apply this today and not have to be married to a timeline in Revelation all the way front to back. So again, I don't know that. This could happen where he could not win, but this still could go on. He could end up losing the election in court, and this still continue on. They will harass him, hound him. The followers are already talking about having a registry and a list of the supporters to be harassed and harangued. This could continue outward. So he doesn't win the election. He's still there, though. And he's still there fighting with these things. So, you could even continue onward, say, like in another 4 years, he will start a movement, a resistance movement to this, what they're doing. And you could have the next president could be from the Trump party, whether, I don't know if he's alive or not. He'll be there. But, there's ways you can read out to it, but you can't really do that because there's too much happening, changing the reality. So I could go out real far, and then something happened that takes that whole line of prediction or whatever and just lops it off like a branch of a tree. And like going back to that one author said, James Rickards, it's better to be mostly right than absolutely wrong. And so I'm trying to be mostly right in the principle applying to it, but I don't want to go too far down that road for the same reasons I mentioned yesterday, last week on this. So that's my reading on this. I interested to see any comments on it and so forth, see what one thinks about it. Maybe they can add to it, fine-tune it. Well, we'll see. We have to, right now we're in a point where they're laying on the ground, being abased and not permitted to have all the good things that have been done. Biden's going to undo them or take credit for them if some stay, and they won't get credit from it. And they're laughing and having fun, partying, giving gifts. This is where we're at now. So we'll have to see. Maybe next week there'll be more filling in, and I can adjust what I've said more, to be more correct with more information. So with that, I will bid you adieu, and just pray God's will be done. Boy, I don't even want to put anything in there. I mean, yeah, I want Trump to win, and I want them to do this stuff, but I want what God thinks is best to happen now, because it is so complicated and so many nuances. And I talked last week about this whole idea of the complex systems theory. It is so complex that it's definitely out of my league. So the last thing I'm going to do is pray to God and tell him to do stuff. I would pray to God and say, intervene on behalf of us, protect individuals, bad things pass over our house, and at the same time, we want the big things moving on the board to be the highest best good for all those involved. So I think I'll leave it at that, and we'll see what happens this week. It seems like every week is like a year. So we will see how things go, how things happen. The Fox News obviously has come out and showed them they've been controlled opposition. They knocked off Judge Janine, but apparently, I'll find out when I sign off. Mark Levine is supposed to be on talking about it. We'll see. Newsmax seems to be the new place to go instead of Fox. And we'll just take it from there. I've already started looking at Parler. I don't like it, but, I don't like Facebook either. But I'm on Gab. It seems to be the best one I like at this point. It's the @ F, the number 2, and F is my ID at Gab. I got in early, so, And I'm still Facebook, and I'm still at Twitter, but I'm now at Parler, which is the same ID that it's at Twitter, which is JAJANCIK. And that is that. We will see you the next time, I hope. And God bless everyone. Oh boy. Oh, what a time.
Feet to Fire is a production of IPS Media Works on the OnSync Radio network of stations.